It took a shootout and 7 rounds for the Devils to solidify a victory in Pittsburgh. But a win is a win. Unfortunately, this particular win came with a price. What was it? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils are Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Okay, I got good news, bad news, but more good news. The first bit of good news, the New Jersey Devils defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins by a score of 3-2. It took them a 7-round shootout in order to secure the 2 points, but all wins count the same at the end of the day. The bad news is Jonas Siegenthaler got injured in the first period, and head coach Sheldon Keefe revealed that he's going to miss some time. The other bit of good news, Erik Haula returned from injury. He had been sidelined for the past 3 or 4 weeks due to an ankle injury. So it was nice to see him back in the lineup. And like I said in the previous episode, the Devils were in need of some more depth, and getting Erik Haula back helps tremendously. Now, Justin Dowling is still in the lineup, being utilized as a third-line center, but Nico is still sidelined due to injury. In the first segment, I will share my main takeaways from the game. We'll also talk about the injury circumstance with Jonas Siegenthaler, how that impacts the Devils, and I'll go into more detail as to how Erik Haula helps New Jersey. Then in the second segment, like I do with every post-game recap victory, I will name some players that caught my eye. First, some honorable mentions, and then my personal 3 stars of the game. Then in the third and final segment, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. All right. Coming into this game, a lot of people were concerned with the Devils, and rightfully so, because I think it's safe to say that January, not really their best month. And going back a bit further to late December, also a rough way to close out 2024. At this point, the Devils are just limping to the 4 Nations break. Because like I said in the previous episode, the Devils, yes, they're not playing their best. However, keep in mind, they're missing some key assets. They had been missing Erik Haula for a while. They're missing their captain, Nico, and they're missing their MVP player, Jacob Markstrom. And we'll talk about Nico Daws and his great performance in between the pipes in the next segment, but focusing on this game. One of the main issues that the Devils have been having this season is winning close games. And Bill Spalding, the play-by-play announcer, talked about it coming into the matchup, which is this is something that the Devils need to work on a little bit more, which is offense is sometimes going to be tough to come by, and you're not going to score an onslaught of goals in order to secure the victory. And this game was living proof, because in this matchup, both the Devils and the Penguins weren't generating that many shots. When looking at the shots on goal category, the most shots that any team had in a period was the Penguins with 9, and that came in the first. The Devils were kind of struggling to find their way a little bit, but luckily they were able to be opportunistic. And while this game wasn't their most impressive win, like I said moments ago, all wins count the same at the end of the day. And Bill, Dano, and Bryce, they were talking about it on air as the third period was coming to an end, which is at that point, you could tell that the Devils weren't going to get another goal on Alex Nedeljkovic. They were trying everything they could do, but the shooting lanes just weren't there. The offense wasn't really electrifying. So they brought up the point, which is send this into overtime so that way you can walk away with something. Because at the very worst, if you lose in overtime or in the shootout, you walk away with a point. And that's what the Devils need to continue to do as we're fast approaching the Four Nations break. And if there's a team that is in desperate need of a pause, it's this Devils unit. So that way they can get Jacob Markstrom back. They could get Nico back. The game against the Penguins, not really anything all that impressive, nothing to really write home about, but a win is a win. Now, let's talk about Jonas Siegenthaler and his injury circumstance. What happened? Because he barely logged 3 minutes of ice time. Well, in real time, people believe that Anthony Beauvillier laid a big hit on him. And as a result, people thought that was the reason why Siegenthaler was down on the ground and slow to get up. But when looking at the replay, he just lost an edge and Beauvillier barely touched him. So, like I just said, freak accident. And Siegenthaler wasn't putting any pressure on one of his legs. The training staff had to come out, help him off the ice. He wasn't on the bench to begin the second period. And post-game, Sheldon Keefe revealed that Siegenthaler is going to miss some time. And if you're curious, when Keefe says that someone is going to miss some time, according to Gabriel Trevino, here's what that most likely means. When Keefe said that about Curtis Lazar missed 21 games. Bastian, 16 games. Hala, 12 games. He's missed 5 games so far, and I don't think he's going to play heading into the break. Markstrom, 4 to 6 weeks. What does that mean for Siegenthaler? Well, we can speculate, but we really don't know until the official assessment is released. And similar to what I've said in prior episodes, I take what I see on Twitter with a grain of salt. So if there's a doctor out there publishing the assessment, I'm just like, look, everyone's body is different. People react to pain differently. So take what you see on social media with a grain of salt, and I'll wait for the Devils to release the situation. But for the time being, Siegenthaler is going to be sidelined for some time, according to Sheldon Keefe. But if this did have to happen, now's the best time to do so, because we're just a couple games away from the Four Nations break. That's going to last about 2 weeks. So if Siegenthaler is going to miss like 4 to 5 weeks, then you just knock off 2 weeks for the Four Nations break, and then Siegenthaler is going to be out for 3 weeks, similar to Erik Haula. I'm just speculating at this point. Logically, if Siegenthaler is set to miss some time, who's going to replace him? Because the Devils obviously can't roll with 5 defensemen. If I had to make an educated guess, I think New Jersey will look at Shimo Nemec. He's been tearing it up for Utica. He was recently named an AHL All-Star, and I actually knew a few people who were covering the AHL All-Star game, and they spoke to Nemec, and they informed me that Nemec isn't really too happy in the AHL right now. Don't take this out of context. He's not requesting a trade. He doesn't want out of the Devils organization, but he doesn't want to be in the AHL because last year he was an everyday NHL player, but that wasn't the plan. He was thrusted into a bigger role because the Devils were dealing with a decent amount of injuries, including Dougie Hamilton, who missed 75% of the season. And come the offseason, the Devils signed Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon. Dougie Hamilton was healthy. There was just no room for him. And if he was on the NHL roster, he would just be a healthy scratch. And that's not fair to his development. So I guess here's a chance for Nemec to be inserted into an NHL role once again. Just speculation on my part, but if I'm just putting 2 and 2 together, if Siegenthaler is going to miss some time, I would expect for the Devils to maybe look at Nemitz and see what he can do. When looking at a player that is now healthy and back in the lineup, Erik Haula. Like I said just a few moments ago, Haula adds more depth to the roster, and he's really good in the faceoff department. He didn't really have a good outing in this game, but I'm not going to hold it against him because this is his first game back after missing 3 or 4 weeks, and the Devils were using Erik Haula in that faceoff dot. He saw 18 faceoffs. He only won 5 of them, which put his faceoff percentage below 30% for this game. But he's going to ease back into it. So you can see how dearly missed Erik Haula was. And if you saw Jack Hughes' second goal of the game, you know how important it is to win faceoffs. So my overall takeaway from this game wasn't the most exciting game, wasn't the most electrifying game. And I'm glad that the Devils walked away with 2 points. And honestly, the shootout was pretty exciting to see. I hate the shootout, but in this case, since the Devils actually won it, I can admit I was thoroughly entertained with that. But you guys know how I feel about the shootout. I think the NHL needs to abolish it. All right. We're going to name some players that caught my eye momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you about FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from the kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, let's name some players that caught my eye in this game. Before I name my 3 stars of the game, first, a few honorable mentions. The first honorable mention goes to all the defensemen because Siegenthaler only logged about 3 minutes of ice time, which meant that the Devils were a little short-staffed when it came to their blue line. They had to pull up the bootstrings, and Sheldon Keefe was putting together some players that I'm sure some of the Devils' discourse is going to be like, don't do that too often, including pairing Luke Hughes and Dougie Hamilton at one point. Speaking of defensemen, I got to give a shout out to Dougie Hamilton and what he did in the shootout because it looked like that the Penguins were going to win. Anthony Beauvillier, he found one past Nico Dawes, and it was Dougie Hamilton's turn. All the pressure was on his shoulders, and as we all know, if Dougie missed that shot, game over, the Penguins win. But Dougie stayed calm, cool, collected, and kept the shootout going. And of course, shout out to Timo Meier, Timo time, for securing the shootout victory for the Devils. 7 rounds of a shootout. I was on the edge of my seat, and like Bill, Bryce, and Dana were saying, at that point, the Devils had to win it for Nico Dawes because he was standing tall in between the pipes. I'll talk about him momentarily. My third and second stars go to peanut butter and jelly, Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes. Jesper Bratt is my third star. He got the primary assist on both of Jack's goals, but I think Jack's second goal was the most exciting one because Jack won the face-off with Sidney Crosby, and he dished it quickly over to Jesper Bratt, and then Jesper set up Jack on a beautiful one-timer shot, and Jack lasered one past Alex Nedeljkovic, and that was just incredible to see because you got Jack Hughes, a superstar in this league, still trying to make a name for himself. And then you got the great Sidney Crosby, one of the best to ever do it. And going toe to toe, it was like old school versus new school. And Jack Hughes came out victorious in that battle. And Bill even jokingly said on air that Jack got some cool points for that one. I got a chuckle out of that one. So Jesper Bratt is my third star. Second star goes to Jack Hughes. He was on hat trick watch, and his first goal, I got to give him credit. He gave the Devils a jolt to close out the first period. I've been saying all episode long, this wasn't the most exciting Devils game, at least the first three periods. But the first period, at least the end, 16.4 seconds remaining in it, and Jack Hughes gave the Devils a 1-0 lead. And Bill said that's vital because the Devils can't put themselves in a hole early and try to climb out of it before it's too late. So I think that goal really gave the Devils a bit of a momentum swing. So that was exciting. And then obviously I described his second goal of the game. Oh man, he could have gotten a hat trick toward the end of overtime. Jack had a wide open breakaway chance, but Nedeljkovic made another great save. And Jack Hughes in the shootout. Why does he continue to put up abysmal performances when it comes to the shootout? Like, this was another case in which he absolutely whiffed at it. Like, it was nowhere close. And honestly, his brother Luke was even worse because Luke missed the cage entirely. So something about the Hughes brothers in shootout situations, not really too good, but I'm not going to nitpick all that much. So peanut butter and jelly, my third and second stars of the game. This might be controversial, but I'm going to give it to Nico Daws. He's my first star, and here's why. In the wake of Jacob Markstrom's injury, I predicted that Jake Allen would start the rest of the way leading up to the break, but Nico Daws, he got the nod in this game. He saw 27 shots and made 25 saves, but honestly, he elevated his game come overtime and the shootout. And I think this game came down to the goaltending. Alex Nedeljkovic and Nico Daws, they both put up hell of a fight, and I'm glad that both teams walked away with something because it's a shame that one team had to lose, but I'm glad that the Devils weren't on the losing end of it. They came away with the 2 points. So it came down to goaltending, and Nico Daws really elevated his game. And Bill, Dano, and Bryce, they were just saying, like, at that point, the Devils had to win it for Nico Daws because during the shootout, he robbed the Penguins point blank. Nedeljkovic, he robbed the Devils point blank at a few points, but Daws came out victorious. I know he didn't get the shutout, but I got to give it, I'll give it to him. He has to be my first star just because of the circumstance and the fact that he seemed to get better as the game progressed. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Shots on goal differential, 27-21 in favor of the Penguins. Power plays, Devils were 0 for 3. Penguins were 0 for 3 as well. Hits, 21-19 in favor of the Devils. Giveaways, 19-16 in favor of Pittsburgh. Takeaways, 7-5 in favor of the Penguins. Block shots, 21-10 in favor of the Penguins. Dano brought this up in the first period, which is this seems to be the theme for the Devils, which is their opponents rack up a lot of block shots. It comes down to clearing up those shooting lanes, and sometimes offense can be tough to come by. This game, a prime example. Time spent in the penalty box, 10 apiece. And shout out to former Devil Ryan Graves. He did nothing in this game, but he got a penalty. So he contributed in that sort of aspect. And also shout out to Sidney Crosby, one of the greatest hockey players of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, and obviously captain for Team Canada in the upcoming Four Nations tournament. He was a cool guy when I spoke to him at his media availability. So check out that episode if you haven't done so already. It was published yesterday. spoke to him, spoke to Austin Matthews, and Sidney actually got hurt at one point in this game. He got hit by Eric Haula and Luke Hughes. He went down the tunnel, but he returned a few minutes later. So the old guys still producing at a decent clip, and the great eight, Alex Ovechkin, leading the charge. But anyway, back to this game and back to the Devils. If I had to give the Devils a letter grade, wasn't their best performance, but far from their worst. Game wasn't really the most exciting until it went into a shootout, but I would much rather the Devils walked away with the win in regulation. But when they're leading after the second period, they're now 25-0-2. So if I had to give them a letter grade, I will give them a solid B because it was still a good performance. It was a boring game, but boring is good. And all wins count the same at the end of the day. Nothing really too egregious and nothing too alarming, at least on my end. And like I said, overtime was entertaining at parts. Shootout was definitely entertaining, but much rather the Devils just solidify the victory in regulation and not give their divisional opponent a point. But that's where I'm going to leave it. So leave your thoughts down below. What did you think of this particular matchup against the Penguins? Are you concerned for the Devils and Jonas Siegenthaler? And what are your thoughts on Eric Haula returning? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TrainMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.